Greetings, and thanks for joining us once again. My name is Carlos Salinas. I'm the Regional Director for the U.S. Soybean Export Council in the Americas. It's a pleasure to be here with you once again. This bi-weekly update is designed for key customers like you and for USEC's internal purposes. We hope that you find it of value, and please continue to send us your feedback so we can improve this presentation. As we do every 2 weeks, we do like to recognize USEC's membership. Within our growing membership, we have soybean processors, soybean exporters, soybean associations, surveyors, railroads, equipment manufacturers, among many other important stakeholders and funding sources. And we cannot forget the support and the contribution that we receive from the U.S. Soybean farmer. Without that support, this presentation would not be possible. Today we have a slightly different agenda. I think for the first time in a while, I will not be talking about markets. I will be talking about soybean meal and soybean quality. I think it's very important. I was just visiting a customer in Mexico, and as you will know, our customers in Mexico have received soybean meal derived from Brazilian soybeans over the last couple of months, and they have felt the difference, and their animals have also felt it. So I would like to address a couple of issues regarding and again, our intent is to make sure that you have all the data up, make the most informed decision for your company. And then I will also address the cost of inputs. In this particular case, I'm talking about financing or money, one of the key ingredients for all of our operations. And I will address some of the data that we have on interest rates from the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, which was recently published. When we talk about digestibility and by how much of that protein within the soybean meal is actually available to the animal, there are different measurements, and one that is commonly used is the KOH test, or the potassium hydroxide solubility test, which attempts to measure that, just how much of that protein is available to the animal. This test should probably not be used alone. It should probably be used with other indicators. At least that is the recommendation of our nutritionists in-house. So let's compare the solubility or the KOH of different origins. In this particular case, we have Argentina, which stands out as the lowest solubility of the soybean meal available. Obviously, 74% is very low. When you compare Brazil, you have a number of 78%, which means that Brazil has obviously a lot more of that protein within the meal is actually available to the animal. And the U.S. comes out with a very close number, very close to Brazil with 78.5, actually not much of a difference. I think the choice, all else being equal, between Brazil and Argentina, or the U.S. and Argentina, it's pretty clear on what your action plan should be. But I think between Brazil and the U.S., it can be a bit cloudy. The numbers are relatively close. But I think something that we need to keep in mind is the standard deviation or the uniformity of this type of data. And on the next slide, I'm going to share with you some of that uniformity. Before I go further to the next slide, I want to highlight that the information provided here is not provided by USEC. We have a company called Evonik that sells many products, but they also sell data, and we have purchased this data from Evonik. So all this data actually does come from Evonik and their internal calculations. Now, when we talk about uniformity of or the standard deviation on the KOH data, we get some interesting information. Over here, we see that Argentina has a number of 6.25. Brazil has a number of 4.6. That is a lot better, certainly, on uniformity of the data compared to Argentina. And when we take a look at the U.S., we have a standard deviation of 3.13. Certainly, from a from a KOH perspective, certainly the data indicates that we are the most uniform regarding the digestibility of soybean meal. So what does this really mean? And I think I want to bring this to your attention. When we take a look at Argentina, if the median KOH was 74.34, and if you're formulating and taking a 1 standard deviation safety margin or protection, you're going to be using a solubility number of 68.09. And 1 standard deviation covers about 68% of the data. And I would say that it's common. You can say it's too aggressive or less aggressive. I think it depends on the operation. But for purposes of comparison, let's take a look at 1 standard deviation. We look at Brazil. Remember, Brazil had a median KOH of 78%, which is not bad, a significant improvement to Argentina, and a 1 standard deviation of 4.6, which means that if you're formulating with Brazilian soybean meal, you're going to be using a standard deviation number of 73.4 within your safety calculations. However, when you do use U.S. Soybean meal, which has an average KOH of 78.5, and you take 1 standard deviation of 3.13, that means that you're going to be formulating with 75.37%, which is obviously significantly higher than the other origins. Obviously, this is very important, specifically when raw material prices are very expensive. You want to make sure that you look beyond the protein and take a look at digestibility and make sure you make the right decisions. Obviously, price will play an important role as well, but again, there's other attributes to be considering when looking at this. So let's change subjects a bit, and maybe they're somewhat interconnected, but let's take a look at soybean quality. We have a company, good friends of ours, Ag Commodities in Argentina, which provides some interesting information on soybean quality. The quality that we have here is for the vessels. All the vessels are loaded in the U.S., in the PNW and the U.S. Gulf and all the ports. And we take a look at the basic attributes, and we compare that to Brazil. And from Brazil, we collect data from all the different ports, and this is the data that is provided by the independent surveyors that actually grade the quality. It's not USEX data. This data is provided on the U.S. by Federal Grade Inspection Services, and in Brazil by the independent surveyors that pull out this data. So I think what is interesting on this data is going to be more the summary of it, all the aggregate. We can take a look at the details later on, but we're going to take a look at the aggregates over the past 12 to 13 months and see what those numbers actually look like. So this is the data, and we can start with obviously a very basic component, which is moisture. I like moisture because a lot of people don't really take it into account. But if you take a look at the calculation on moisture, you can see that the difference between U.S. and Brazil is actually 1.49%, right? So if you take out the price of soybeans, CNF China, and you multiply it times 1.49%, it's a significant number in your calculation. And certainly, you don't want to be paying the price of soybeans for more water within those soybeans. And I would say the U.S. stands out, obviously, for being much drier raw material. Protein, when you look at protein, we know that Brazil has a slightly higher protein. But again, look at the solubility of that protein, as we discussed earlier, how much of that protein is really available and what is the uniformity on that quality. Again, so what looks as a right decision, if you look beyond the numbers, maybe your answer is going to be slightly different. I don't think there's any question that Brazilian soybeans have a higher oil content than U.S. soybeans, but I do invite the crushers at destination that are choosing between one origin and the other to talk to your labs and to certainly talk with the refineries, whether it's your own refiner or you sell that crude degummed soybean oil to be refined by a third party. But we all know that there is a cost if the color from Brazil doesn't meet specs, or we have had issues actually meeting the acidity levels required under different contracts. That is the FFA with Brazilian soybeans, and that involves a cost. Not to mention, obviously, additional bleaching clay costs or other issues like yield loss, which are very important in a. So while the oil content is higher, again, just make sure that you take a look at the net calculation. For material, I think it goes up and down in different sources. Yes, I think the U.S. is slightly higher, 1.18. I just want to clarify that 1% is actually the specification for a number one yellow soybeans in the U.S. So we're very close to a number one yellow soybeans on foreign material. I think where the difference or the biggest difference stands out is actually on damage. In this case, we have certainly heat damage, where Brazilian soybeans are significantly higher, and total damage. And this is due for many reasons, mainly due to the soybeans when you harvest them. So it has to do with climate and then capacity of the industry to dry those soybeans to an exportable bag as well. And if you don't dry them well, obviously, then you have to store them, and soybeans tend to heat up when you store them for a longer period of time. So I think that's where the challenge. I think the challenge lies, and we have to be aware of that difference. But the difference in damage and heat damage, who feels it the most? Yeah, you do see the color and you see the acidity on the oil, but certainly when you sell that soybean meal, you don't see it on the grade factors. You only see that when you actually do a lab test and you run digestibility tests, and you find out that when you compare one origin to the other, one origin has certainly a lot more digestibility than the other, and then one origin has a lot more quality uniformity compared to the other origin. So let's change subjects and let's talk about another raw material or an input. I like to say it's the cost of money, which is very important, certainly for not only for the ag industry, for the whole value chain, exporters, processors, customers. I mean, I get it. It's one of the key ingredients that applies to all of us, and we've seen significant changes. I wanted to highlight this information, which was just published last week by the Federal Reserve Bank in Kansas City, and it tells us what the average fixed interest rate has been in certainly some of the key soybean producing areas in the U.S. And I want to read the asterisks in case you cannot, but this is the average of fixed rates on agricultural loans of all types: operating, intermediate, real estate. So we see that going back from 2022 through 2023, interest rates have almost doubled, right? And I think this has a significant impact to the value chain. Many of our members may not be using or having operating capital in millions of dollars, but billions of dollars. So all this has a significant cost to all of us, and our end user as well, our customers. I was just talking to one of our key customers that sells pork to a supermarket in Latin America, and he was telling me that the supermarket is not even asking him, telling him that they're going to pay him in a window of 90 days, right? So everybody's trying to get savvy about operating working capital. And I think you need to be aware of that, because at the end of the day, it translates to a cost to everybody, and it's going to translate to a higher cost in the value chain. And changing subjects a little bit, but again, land is obviously another key ingredient for the production of all grains, and soybeans are no exception. But while a lot of our farmers do own their land, many operators lease land, and when those leases come to term, naturally, if land values have increased, the tendency from the landlords is also going to be to increase the value of those leases or those rentals to operate, which is also an increased cost. So I think we also need to be aware of how this is impacting our farmers, and certainly how it's impacting the whole value chain. I hope the information shared here with you was of value. Please continue to send us your feedback, and joining us in Soyco Next. I hope that we can talk to you in New York. Take care. Bye-bye.